Kim Neely. Trauma-Informed SLP. Sup? You like your science weird? Come here. I got you. I got your weird science. What up? Today, I want to describe what I mean when I call myself a complex neurodivergent, because I feel like that's a more appropriate label for myself. I very well might be ADHD, but I have to acknowledge I do have other complexities that make me a little bit of a weirdo, which I'm okay with. It's okay. Just in case you don't know, I did do this in a rather long video on terminology, but neurodivergent is the term I use. It's a general term for anyone who kind of falls outside of the average human thought patterns and the average way a human brain functions, okay? And yes, it's very likely that at an individual level, neurotypical doesn't really exist, because whenever you try to fit an individual to an average, we're usually pretty complex and we don't always fit that. Kind of like how body mass index doesn't really fit a lot of people with different body types. You know what I mean? Kind of like that when you try to average stuff. So here's my neurodivergencies I've got. Okay. Definitely got ADHD for sure. Late diagnosed, but the signs were definitely there early on in life, and even one of my parents suspected it pretty strongly when I was younger, but I didn't want a diagnosis because I didn't want confirmation I was different as a teenager, because I already struggled enough with feeling so different that I felt very unworthy. So I didn't really want anything then. I also have diagnosis of anxiety and depression, which I do take medication for, which helps a lot, because without the medication, I end up in really numb situations, emotionally numb. So my depression, when it gets bad, when I have a really bad depressive episode, I feel incredibly emotionally numb and empty, and I feel very dissociated from things. Like I'm kind of just sort of like observing life, not actually experiencing anything good or bad. And it's very difficult to get through your life feeling numb, because nothing really changes. Like emotion is what kind of gives life its like dynamics and its vibrancy, as someone who has experienced not having them. Like you can be doing an awesome, cool thing and witnessing an amazing sunset, but you have no emotional response to it. And that is even more depressing, if you could believe that. That's like, it's kind of even worse, that it's like, ugh, like I can't, nothing budges, everything's the same. Ugh. So I also have likely complex post-traumatic stress disorder, c-PTSD, very likely from childhood traumas, long chronic childhood trauma. I've also had 3 main mild brain injuries to the back of my head, so concussions essentially. And when I was in my mid-20s and doing my master's of music and voice performance, I had that's when I had the 3rd one that was a pretty big impact and lost consciousness and everything. But that's where I had definitely a post-concussive syndrome, which was not diagnosed, because I saw a neurologist who didn't really believe in it, which does happen. There are neurologists out there who don't think concussions have impacts like that, but I fit post-concussive syndrome to a T. What I was experiencing fits it to a T. There's only a couple of things I wasn't experiencing if you look at that list. So I had extreme dizziness, inability to sleep despite prescription medication to knock me out. I still could only sleep 2 hours a night for a while. Splitting headaches, ridiculously painful headaches, where sometimes it literally felt like I was being stabbed in my brain. I had a lot of impulsivity, meaning if I felt something, I expressed it instead of holding it back, which would be more appropriate. That's where I started to notice my extreme sensitivities to sound. I think I always was a little stressed by super noisy environments prior to that, but I kind of pushed through it. But thanks to that concussive stuff, especially immediately after that, during this post-concussive stage, being in a noisy environment was way harder for me after that. So brain injuries would be an acquired neurodivergency, but prior to getting these concussions, I still had sensory sensitivities. I definitely had food sensitivities growing up. My parents always made fun of me because no food could touch each other on a plate. I had to have very clear boundaries, well past the age where you expect that. That kept going well into my teenage years, and I still do it sometimes depending on the food. And it would be the point where like if one thing kind of touched slightly on the edge, I would just leave this line of food. It was like, it's like, this is the no-go area. This is like the, these things touched. We're not eating that part. So I always had that. I always really liked stimming on sparkles and glittery things and sequins. I love sparkly things. And I think that was really a part of my stimming, that I did for myself. And yeah, and I did a lot of like imaginative play in terms of playing dress up, and I did that way later than you would expect. I continued that type of behavior on into like middle school of like just wearing a costume all day long in my house, and just like play acting in my room, like all kinds of stuff all the time. And some of that could be escapism, but also I think some of it was this like neurodivergent, like kind of like societal rehearsal. If you like act out things, you can kind of rehearse things a lot. And I've always done that. I've always talked to myself. I've always rehearsed conversation. I've always reviewed conversations and thought to myself, how can I improve what I'm saying when I talk next to people? Like, how can I make myself more clear next time, et cetera, et cetera. I've done that stuff. And then, you know, maybe with all these sensory overlaps and everything, maybe I do have an autistic profile as well. Maybe I have the AUDHD, the autism ADHD, which I always want to say is AuDHD, but I guess it would be AuDHD, because like autism, AuDHD, is that what people are going for? I've never heard it pronounced, so I don't know. I think that's what they're going for, which would make sense. That makes more sense than ADHD, because doesn't make any sense. Like, where would the O be? Autistic. That's not how we say it. We don't say autistic. I'm autistic. It does feel kind of fun in your mouth, though, to say autistic. Okay, anyway, nonetheless. So in thinking of this, like, autistic overlap and stuff, I want to put this out here because sometimes when I talk about autistics, I find myself saying we because I relate so heavily to so much of the experiences. And so I just want to put this out here as like, maybe I'm not going to use, I'm still in the overthinking it, and I don't know if I necessarily want to use that label for myself because I don't want to co-opt it and use it wrong, and which is possibly a sign that maybe it's more correct than I think because I'm really overthinking it. But yeah, so I went to this Embrace Autism website where you can do a lot of different questionnaires, which they're not diagnostic, but for adults, a lot of these questionnaires do hold a lot of diagnostic weight. Because when you're an adult, it really has to be based much more on your own experiences than other people's perceptions of you, especially if you've learned how to mask. So in that sense, I'm probably not going to seek a formal diagnosis, but given my training and knowledge and background and the results here, it makes sense that I have a lot of overlap with autistic experiences. So first one I took was the CAT-Q, which is the Camouflaging Autistic Traits questionnaire. My CAT-Q score, my total score was 123, which if you score over 100, you hide autistic traits. So I was 123 was my total score. And my compensation score was a 44, which was a little higher. They broke it down into female, male, and non-binary camouflaging traits for CAT-Q scores for autistics, and I'm a little higher than even the non-binaries on compensation. My masking score was a 39, which was a little higher than the female scores, which was the other highest one, and my assimilation score was a 40, which is it's below the female assimilation scores for autistics, but about the same as male and non-binary. And as an agender person, it makes a lot of sense. And I think they included the non-binary folks in there because non-binary people automatically have some level of camouflaging or masking to like fit in with one gender or another, if, you know, to be more accepted. So, which is interesting as well in and of itself. But so that's my CAT-Q, Camouflaging Autistic Traits questionnaire. So I have really high compensation, not surprising. Because I usually I still rehearse conversations so much out loud to myself and like copy things. I try to mirror a lot when I'm around people. And that's gotten me into trouble because as an agender person, I sometimes mirror male behaviors, especially in like a male dominated field or something. And that gets you into trouble, let me tell you. Like males don't really like it when a female body looking person mimics their own behavior doesn't tend to come off very well. Yeah. So I have a higher compensation, decently high masking, not as high as some, but decently high compared to average scores. And my assimilation scores are lower than female autistics, average female autistic scores, but about the same as male and non-binary. So trying to fit in with others in social situations, which I guess would overlap a fair amount with compensation. Like if I'm mirroring people's behavior a lot, I guess that would also include assimilation probably. Anyway, so then I took the autism quotient, which is just like a little questionnaire on like, do you overlap with autistic people or not? That's the one where I scored a 35, and the threshold score is 26 or greater, means you might be autistic. So I scored, I'm above 26 there with the 35. I also took the RADS-R, which is the RITVO, Autism Asperger Diagnostic Scale Revised. My overall score there was 111, which the meaning is if your score of 90 means stronger indications of autism, although non-autistics may score as high. 130 is mean score of autistic people, strong evidence for autism, and I was 111, which social relatedness was like higher. Language was pretty low, so like my language use, probably related to like camouflaging. Sensory motor was a 34, which I don't remember the breakdowns on those. And circumscribed interest was a 20. So I do have some repetitive, like obsessive interests. Like trauma-informed care. That's one of them. It's one of them. Adult Repetitive Behaviors Questionnaire, the RBQ-2A, I scored a 42, which scoring range 20 to 60, the threshold score is 26 or above. 36 is the average autistic score, with 25 being the non-autistic score. So I'm a little higher than the average autistic score on the Adult Repetitive Behaviors Questionnaire. And then I did take the ASPE quiz, which I know is really unfortunately named because like we don't use Asperger's anymore. But this is still what the quiz is called, the ASPE quiz. So the way the ASPE quiz works is like you take all these questions and it assesses how autistic you might be in 5 domains: talent, perception, communication, relationships, and social domains. And then it compares your score to the typical non-autistic or neurotypical score, which I guess non-autistic doesn't really mean neurotypical. It could be just more like A-listic score. But anyway, nonetheless, my score difference was a 37, which puts me in the very likely ASPE, sorry, I just dropped my fidget, but very likely ASPE or neurodiverse category. That's what they call it. I'm using this because that's their words there. So yeah, so I might fall into there. I'm much further into the autistic areas in the area of talent, perception, and relationship, and a little bit for communication. Yeah. And then of course, given the TikTok thing about monotropism, I had to take that quiz because, yeah. And I looked up the original article and took the quiz, and my score on the monotropism questionnaire was 197 out of 235. So this suggests that I am more monotropic than about 55% of autistic people and 96% of A-listic people. So yeah, so I'm much more monotropic than non-autistics. I'm more monotropic than 96% of non-autistic people, A-listic, and I'm more monotropic than about 55% of autistic people. So I definitely have that singular focus, attentional thing of monotropism there a bit. And one of the reasons why I took this is because there's this Neurodivergent Insights website where a neurodivergent, I think, psychologist or counselor puts up a lot of stuff, and she put up this little infographic on like ADHD versus autism, and I just sort of like, I checked all the little, in my mind, I was checking like on this whole list, like what I fit, and I checked like every single ADHD thing, and she has an overlap, and I'm like, all of those is also me. And then under the autism bubble, I was like, about like strongly 2 out of like the 5 things she listed, but like kind of also in like, like maybe not as severe, but I'm also older, and I think I've learned some strategies since then. So I'm putting this out here because it's like, listen, I've got a lot of overlaps, and I have recently realized that what I've called anxiety attacks in the past, I've had them. I've had panic attacks, but sometimes they're actually meltdowns. They're more of like a sensory overwhelm or a sensory shutdown. And it's actually been really helpful because even if I go to vacation to like a new city, I can get a sensory overwhelm really fast just from how new it all is and where I am and what I'm looking at and all the stimuli coming at me. And it's been helping me to figure out like, ooh, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed here. I need to go like, let's find a coffee shop and I'll just go and sit and like do a puzzle or something on my phone and like chill out my brain a little bit so that I can go back out to the day. And it's been really helping me manage that because vacations, especially to new cities particularly, that's one of the areas where like it's always exhausting. And I've always pushed myself probably too far and been so burnt out after a vacation that like I need a vacation from the vacation like for like a week. Like I can't get back into the swing. And so it's actually been helping a lot. The fact that like I now know like, oh, that's a sensory sensitivity. And like I need to like, my brain needs like low stimuli for a while. I need like a quiet, calm place to sit and like let me do some of my little hyper-focused puzzle business and like just do some of my little puzzle apps and stuff and just zone out for a little bit. And then, you know, after however much time has passed, I'll feel more able to go out and enjoy myself again instead of like just pushing through and burning myself out, because that's what I've done like my whole life. And it's been really nice. It's been really eye-opening. Lovely. Anyway, so that's a little bit about me. So when I talk about my own experiences professionally, which I do plan on doing here and putting out some of my own reflections on, you know, what has been a neurodivergent struggle for me and things like that, because it's all this part of this learning experience that like you keep gaining more and more and more awareness of yourself, and it keeps putting different parts of my life into a different perspective for myself. And so when I post things about that, and if I say things about autistic, even, and maybe I'll just start using the label, maybe I should just give it up and not overthink it and just be like, yes, you are AuDHD, I guess. Autistic ADHD. Autistic AuDHD. AuDHDer? Maybe I'll just start saying it, but if I don't, and I say we, I just want to put this qualification out there because I do have overlapping experiences that I think is pretty clear. Whether or not these questionnaires diagnose me or not, whatever, whether or not I'm self-diagnosing, it's still pretty clear that a lot of the overlaps still apply, because I wouldn't be scoring within autistic ranges if I wasn't having very similar perceptions and experiences to autistics who have taken these questionnaires. Because these questionnaires are all like validated and normalized and like they're part of research. So these are like, they're not like the listicles on TikTok. These are like actual, like, I could take these questionnaire results to a professional and they might determine if I need more testing or might want to ask me a few more things, but like these could actually be part of like a diagnostic profile for a professional. So they're very good. I'll leave a link below for Embrace Autism, I think is what it's called. If you're curious at all, or if you wonder about those things for yourself. And also for ADHD, the adult screener for ADHD is online. If you're suspecting that with yourself, there is an adult screener that is like the official, like normalized, validated, like researched screener for adults. And there's like a part A that is sort of the actual screener, and then a part B that goes into more details of what type of ADHD you might have, if it's more like internalized versus externalized behaviors. Internalized ADHD being like the hyper part is like inside your brain rather than showing in your body. I can leave a link to that too, because that's actually one of the places where I started with that. And then I brought it to my own psychiatrist because I was already seeing a psychiatrist for my anxiety and depression medication maintenance. And that's who I went to with like, I did this screener. And then she asked me a lot more, like she asked me some more questions and like did a little more like intake stuff. And it was during COVID shutdown, so it was all over video. But I didn't do any like super formal testing, I guess, in that sense. But yeah, she was the one who diagnosed me with that based off my screener answers and then also some other stuff that she asked me about. So, which is a valid way to diagnose an adult because, you know, Adults have developed a lot of different strategies. So the way I might score on like a neuropsychological exam might be very different and might put me in like neurotypical ranges when it just means that I've learned how to do those tasks because, well, first off, I know a little something about a lot of what like the memory tasks and stuff look like. So I'll kind of have a sense of what they're testing. And then, which can impact it, maybe, I don't know. But also like, it might just mean I have more strategies to help than like comparative to kids. And I think it also becomes tricky for somebody who, like, in a hospital setting, I assessed cognitive states, like in terms of executive functionings. Like, I've given the MOCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, so many times that I'm pretty sure that assessment, if I ever end up with, hopefully not, but if I ever end up with a brain injury and I'm in the hospital and someone tries to test me with that test, it's going to be such a skewed result because I've done that test so many times. I nearly have the thing memorized, long-term memory. So it's like, I'm going to look better than I am. I feel like, hey, researchers out there, if anyone wants to do this as your PhD, like looking for a topic, if you're in cognitive science or psychology or anything, can you come up with a cognitive test for professionals who test cognition? That would actually be really useful. Some of us are going to age into needing those tests. We're going to age into where people are going to be testing with those tests, and we're going to look so much better than we actually are because we've used the same test over and over. Anyway, side note on that. But yeah, ultimately, even if I go by ADHD, I guess, autistic ADHD, I would still fit into complex neurodivergent because I still had the mild TBIs and the trauma history and stuff like that, which all of that stuff impacts the way the brain perceives and thinks across everybody. So that automatically makes me a little different, a little weird. Which is why I say I'm just going to reclaim the weird because I was always teased with that word. And I've accepted that, yes, I am weird. And weird doesn't have to mean inferior. It could just mean different. And that's fine. Okay, so with that said, everybody keep it weird, y'all. And if you found this at all helpful, or if you just even like the links and stuff, please like, subscribe, comment. If you have any questions or you have any other thoughts and topics you want me to go more in depth with, please comment below. I really want to try to get going on this and be more motivated and a little less in my head about making things perfect. I just need to get over that and just be myself and like just do the thing. Just need to do the thing. So that's what I'm hoping to do. With all that said, I hope you guys have good weeks, days, whenever it is you see me next. And yeah, keep it weird, guys. Keep it weird.